Hello again. This is Brian Toohey, the author of The Fix is In, The Fix is Still In, and the website thefxisin.net. I've produced a few YouTube videos about my research over the years, and recently many of you have found my video titled The Proof. And while many agree with what I discuss in that video, some of you don't seem to think what I put in that video is enough proof for you. I get it, you want hard evidence. Well, no player or coach has come right out and said I have fixed this game. Yet. But the evidence I provide in that video, plus your own eyes and experience, should prove everything I'm saying about professional sports is true. But fine, you want more proof? Well, here you go. I'm not going to talk about such things as Michael Jordan's bogus retirement, or the sabotaged Super Bowl, or how so many hashtag strong teams have amazingly reached the finals in their respective sport. Nope. What I'm going to talk about in this video are 5 proven, no doubt about it facts and events that should show you once and for all that sports are more about entertainment and money than actual physical competitions. Let's start with boxing. Boxing is fixed. It has been fixed for over 100 years. Whether it's the story of the fake heavyweight champion Primo Carnera, who had every fight of his fixed including winning the championship, or the fact that mobster Frankie Carbo completely controlled the sport in the 1950s with the help of 2 NHL legends in Arthur Wirtz and James Norris, or just Don King's entire career. Boxing has a legacy of being fixed, and it didn't stop in the 1950s either. Just listen to former boxing manager Charles Farrell.
I managed Leon Spinks, former heavyweight champ. I managed Tyrone Booz, former cruiserweight champ. Junior middleweight champ Buster Drayton, featherweight champ Freddie Norwood, and for the briefest of periods, a guy named Jose Rivera, who was the welterweight champ. You fix fights to make betting money. You fix fights to get a fighter a championship. You fix fights to maneuver a fighter up the ranks toward a championship fight. You fix fights to win in order, again, to position someone strategically. You fix fights to lose in order to get paid and in order to make, betting coups.
Can you say how many fights you fixed?
Hundreds. How many, I'm not sure, but hundreds.
And how many millions of dollars have been made selling boxing matches on pay-per-view over the years? The number is unbelievable. Now, how many of you have heard of collusion in baseball? A lot of people like to say conspiracies don't and can't happen in sports. Well, the most provable one happened in Major League Baseball in the 1980s. All of the owners got together in a room with Commissioner Peter Ueberroth and decided they weren't going to pay for any free agents. They were going to kill the market. It didn't matter if future Hall of Fame players were available in free agency. The owners all agreed not to touch another team's free agents. The league did this for 3 straight seasons. It didn't matter to the owners if they won or lost during this period. They only cared about money. The only problem was that they made it so blatant as to what they were doing, the players figured it out. They sued and won over $250 million in court. But the owners literally conspired against the players. Allegedly, they tried to do this again in the 2000s. And while this isn't game fixing per se, the outcome of the 1985, 86, and 87 seasons were all affected by what the owners decided to do, because once again, wins and losses didn't matter, money did. Speaking of baseball, how legitimate are the balls themselves? When Rob Manfred took over as commissioner, he demanded a more exciting game. And wouldn't you know it, home run numbers dramatically increased across the board in Major League Baseball. Were the players juicing? Well, probably. But what was certainly being juiced was the baseballs themselves. And Major League Baseball admitted they can and will alter their balls. The players noticed.
I know Mr. Manfred says the balls haven't changed, but I think there's enough information out there to say that's not true.
Altering baseballs to create more home runs, or conversely, to lessen home runs, is altering baseball games. And who's to say when the juiced or unjuiced balls are being used within a game? Again, like collusion, this isn't exactly a fixed game, but it's certainly not a game being played on the level. And how many wins and losses did this baseball manipulation create? How many careers and contracts were affected? Essentially, you have to ask, how legitimate is Major League Baseball? Now, bad calls and human errors are one thing, but when it's being dictated by the league, then it becomes something else. Back in the 1960s, NHL referees admitted the league instructed them to essentially fix games by determining when and where penalties should be assessed. The book Hockey, the story of the world's fastest game, was first published in 1969. In that first edition, and only in the first edition of the book, there's a chapter titled The Troubles of the NHL that is all about the NHL referees manipulating games. The authors wrote, "Like most big businesses, hockey rarely is fun to the people closely involved with the game. In fact, it is run just like any other business. And just like any other business, it has its seamier side that too often is overlooked by those who are the supposed sentinels and chroniclers of hockey." Then they quoted the refs. For example, former referee Jack Mellenbacher said, "Anytime you got a bottom team against a top team, you were told to go easy on the bottom team. All the NHL is interested in is 2-1 and 3-2 scores. Close games mean better box office." Another NHL referee, Red Story, wrote an article for a national hockey magazine and declared, "The NHL is becoming a circus and the referees are the clowns." His former colleague, Dalton MacArthur, added, "All teams were to be treated as equals, but some teams were more equal than others." Red Story also said, "When I first entered the league, I was told if there were any breaks going, to give them to the home team. When I was told this, I suggested to Mr. Campbell that if the home team won each game, the teams would wind up tied for first place. He said, well, there's nothing wrong with that. What they don't want is weak teams to be hurt too much by penalties." Flash forward to now, and you get referee Tim Peel saying this on a hot mic.
12:42 to go in the second.
It wasn't much, but I wanted to get a fucking penalty against Nashville early in.
And this isn't just happening in the NHL. Former NBA referee Tim Donaghy claimed the same thing happens in the NBA all the time.
Tim Donaghy, nice enough to join us. You know better than anybody that the NBA is the one league where everybody feels there's a conspiracy. Does the NBA encourage referees to keep games close? Or in playoff series to push it to 7-6?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that knows the game in the NBA that when a team's up by 20 points, the referees officiate a different way. They start giving all the benefits of the calls to the team that's down in that game. It's called the way to control the game and keep everybody happy, because if a coach and a player is down by 20 points and you're still making calls against them, they feel like you're embarrassing them and they get upset. So in order to keep the peace, they try to give the benefit of the calls that the team is down in the game by 20 or 25 points. And what happens is it brings it a little bit closer and it brings viewership back. The same thing with the series in the playoffs.
Is that an edict from the league? Do you feel that? Is that officials talking to coaches? Is that officials talking to officials? How does that dynamic come about?
Each time you referee a game in the playoffs, they have somebody from the league office come in and you go over the game tapes of the previous game. I talk about this in my book at length, where I was in a series in Houston when they were ahead of the Dallas Mavericks. It was 2 or 3 games to 1. And they told us to concentrate on illegal screens on Yao Ming and traveling violations on Yao Ming. And we left that meeting saying, geez, Houston's going to be, at a disadvantage tonight. Not only were they at a disadvantage that night, but they ended up losing the entire series in 7 games to Dallas. So they string these playoff series along to the best of their ability through the referees by telling them and dictating to them what to call.
So here are former refs admitting the leagues rig their own games. Is this not proof enough? Well, then let's end with tanking. There's the famous Mark Cuban quote, which, by the way, is the second time he publicly admitted to making the Mavericks tank games.
The Mavs, once we were eliminated from the playoffs, we did everything possible to lose games.
But we all know game tanking in the NBA is real.
How far will Adam go in acknowledging what everybody else is talking about? How far will he admit something's out there?
Well, he's already admitted something's out there. What I think where his senses will be heightened, for lack of a better phrase, is if it becomes a bit too obvious and you can't fight off the perceptions. That's something that he can't have. Remember that the Philadelphia 76ers with this famed process, trust the process. It was Adam Silver that ultimately intervened, that had something to do with Jerry Colangelo ultimately landing in Philly, because he had spoken to Sixers ownership from a couple of years back because it was so alarming how they were losing on purpose. This it's one thing to be sacrificing games because you're trying to position yourself for a lottery pick, a high lottery pick. That's happened throughout NBA history. You can look as far back to the San Antonio Spurs when it came to a David Robinson or when it came to a Tim Duncan. Boston with Rick Pitino and how he was competing with the Spurs to get the #1 overall pick because Larry Bird and McHale and Parrish and those boys were not walking through that door. It's understandable when that happens, even though the commissioner wants to keep an eye on it. It's something entirely different when you're sacrificing seasons, which is what the Philadelphia 76ers did. And because it's working out so well for them, it's like a double-edged sword. The NBA loves what they're seeing from Philadelphia, but the process it took to get there, that is not something that the commissioner would ever endorse.
Very ugly.
Sports writers even advocated for it. But these are fixed games. In fact, it is the very definition of a fixed game. The GM, or more likely the owner, are instructing their coaches and players to lose on purpose. What more evidence do you need that this can happen? And for fans, despite teams losing on purpose, there's no discounted tickets, there's no refund on season tickets, no nothing. It's just another NBA game, and it's broadcast as such. Oh, and this apparently is going on in the NFL as well. 2 former head coaches, Brian Flores and Hugh Jackson, publicly claimed to have been instructed to lose by their respective team owners. They were even offered bonus money for their troubles. But this is the very proof that these leagues can and do fix their own games. I don't know how to make this more obvious to the doubters out there. It is 100% legal for a league to fix its own games. The owners have colluded amongst themselves. They have altered gameplay by altering the rules and equipment. They've instructed officials where and when to call penalties, and they have told their coaches and players to lose on purpose. What more proof do you need?